Before we get into this video, I just need to show you my new tattoo. How cool is that? How cool is that? I know I say this a lot, I know I've said it a lot lately, but this topic that we're covering today is probably one of the most requested topics for this series, for the Horrors of series. 4chan has been the most requested website to ever make one of these videos on. And do you know what? At first, I was like, why? Like, I know what 4chan is, like, I get it, I know, like, some weird things go down on there, but I was like, surely it's not as bad as everyone's making out, right? Right? Oh my god, I was wrong. I feel like I need therapy after going through all of this research. There have been so many things on here that I actually can't mention on this video because it's so horrendous. I knew this shit was bad, but I didn't know it was that bad, okay? I didn't expect this to be so horrendous. And to be honest, after researching for this video, I feel like it needs to be absolutely wiped from the entirety of the internet because what the fuck? That's right, 4chan has been plaguing the internet since 2003, so today let's have a little bit of a deep dive, semi-deep dive into some of the controversial and the horrors that this website has had to offer throughout the many years. Strap in because it's an absolute doozy, and I feel like I also need to give a little bit of a trigger warning as some of the topics on here are kind of upsetting and disturbing, so you've been warned. But if you're still here, let's just get straight into it. Okay, so first of all, if you're like me and you've never really used 4chan, I mean, you know of it, but you've never really used it. I didn't really know what 4chan was, so don't worry, that's what I'm here for. I'm going to tell you what it's all about. So again, as I mentioned previously, 4chan was made back in 2003, which makes me a year older than 4chan. And it was created by a man named Christopher Poole, who is known as Moot online. Now, originally, 4chan was created because it was originally a place for English-speaking fans of Japanese anime, mangas and stuff, and they could discuss the topics on 4chan. And it was based off of Japanese website 2chan. So basically, it was just a place for English anime fans to come and hang out and have discussions. But for some reason, it gained a mind of its own and started to sort of go down this rabbit hole of content that kept being added that wasn't about anime, but it was fine because it was fine, I guess. Now, a little bit of background about 4chan is you are completely anonymous. You don't have to create an account, you don't add an email, you don't add a username, a password, anything. Anyone can post on 4chan, and threads expire pretty quickly, meaning that things often become lost unless it's been screen grabbed. And as you can imagine, because of the anonymity that 4chan offers, you can imagine that lots of the posts on there are pretty disturbing, blunt, shocking, racist, misogynistic, homophobic, and horrendous. That's because you are completely anonymous. You can't really be traced either. So over time, 4chan grew from this little Japanese anime manga website into something a little bit more niche. It's split into a series of themed boards. So for example, the B board, which is the most common board, is known as the random board, but we'll come back to these boards in a little bit. The A board is for anime, the Pol board is for politics, the X board is for paranormal, and each of these boards comes with its own like little culture and set of rules, and not many of them have many rules at all, so it's an absolute free-for-all. The fact that these boards also have minimal moderation created a space where users felt the need that they can share absolutely anything their heart desires, which often range from shocking content to straight up illegal and disturbing, including child porn. And yet, it's happened. But despite all of the horrors, it wouldn't be fair of me if I didn't mention this, because 4chan has become quite the staple in early internet culture. For example, Pepe the Frog, that originated from 4chan, the Wojaks, the troll faces, all of them came from 4chan. Lots of memes, sayings, a lot of it stems from 4chan. I hate to say it, but we probably wouldn't be where we are today without this horrendous website, which is kind of hard to admit, but it's the truth. But I'm not going to blow smoke up its ass for much longer, because 4chan has also been linked to so many harassment campaigns, misinformation, extremism, radicalisation, and leaks of stolen content, including real-life crimes. So let's have a look at a little bit of history around 4chan. So first of all, we need to ask the question, why is the site so controversial? And it's a little bit of a silly question with a not so simple answer. As mentioned previously, the fact this website is completely anonymous means that many of its users can post literally anything their disturbing hearts desire with minimal to no consequences. This does create a space where it's really toxic and horrendous, but it also encourages a little bit of creativity. You can imagine the hate speech, the posts, the slurs, all of it, as well as the criminal activity, because trust me, there's lots. This site has such a huge culture of trolling. Like, this is the place where you will be trolled. Many of the boards, including the B board and the politically incorrect board, also known as the poll board, has, you know, lots of posts on there that rely on shock value and I quote, doing it for the lols. And this has led to the harassment of many individuals, as well as fake social media campaigns which are designed to deceive the public, which have been successful, and we'll come back to this in a moment, as well as the deliberate spreading of misinformation about pretty serious topics or real world events. Lots of these campaigns start out as, quote, just trolling, but they spill over into the real world and create real life issues and problems for people involved, such as doxing, swatting, and even influencing extreme real world violence. I also feel like I need to mention the fact that a lolicon board was created. Lolicon, I feel like you can already work out what that is. But this board was actually disabled because real life child was posted onto the board, and it was then deleted in October of 2004. This is the kind of site that we're dealing with, and that was as early as a year after its creation that things like this were happening. Now, it's also important to mention that in September of 2015, Poole actually stepped down as the CEO of 4chan, and it was handed to someone else. 4chan has also been a magnet for controversial or fringe content, because mainstream platforms actually ban it. So this includes topics such as pretty horrific conspiracy theories, offensive humour, extremist propaganda, and in the past years, illegal content. And the lack of the moderation and filtering means that anything goes and anything can be posted, and you just have to be unfortunate enough to come across it. So before we look at some of the controversies the site has to offer, I feel like I should tell you a little bit about the notable boards that are on 4chan, just so you have an idea of what we're dealing with. So the most common and most horrendous board on 4chan is the random board, also known as the B board. This one is the most well-known and most popular, and unlike most boards on this site, this one obviously doesn't have a theme. It's called the random board for a reason, and you can post about anything you want on this board. And of course, this has given this board a reputation for being chaotic, unpredictable, controversial, and downright disgusting. The B board has been known for the birthplace of many internet memes, such as the Rickroll, the lol cows. It's also a hub for the content that has been the most disgusting, disturbing, the worst that the site has to offer. In 2012, an MLP board, or My Little Pony board, was created after the so-called brony phenomenon began to overtake the internet. And this is because My Little Pony fans began flooding unrelated boards with their garbage fan art. The reason why I call it garbage is because lots of it is NSFW. So to contain the pony discussion, they actually just gave it their own board and were like, there you go, have at it, take it elsewhere. The culture of the MLP board is pretty much a unhealthy mix of sincere fans and also the most horniest degenerates you will ever come across. You'll find episode discussions, fan art, fan fiction, and even character debates, but also the typical 4chan style humour of the most depraved NSFW or absurd posts you can come across. Another common board or well-known board is the paranormal board on 4chan, which is also known as the X board, and this board is for, you know, horror, unexplained phenomena, the supernatural, conspiracy theories. This is also where the SCP Foundation came from, as well as many other of the earliest creepypastas stemmed from here. The backrooms also gained popularity from this 4chan board, which is pretty insane when you think about it. I'm glad at least one board can birth some pretty cool stuff. Then you also have the political board, which I don't think I need to go into, because you can already imagine what that's like. So that's just a select handful of boards, just so you have an idea of what we're dealing with. So let's look at some actual crimes and controversies that have occurred on this godforsaken website. And the first one is known as Celebgate, also known as, and I quote, the fappening. This was one of the largest and most notorious mass leaks of private explicit celebrity photos of internet history. And 4chan was the first major place where these stolen images were exposed into public view. That's right, a bunch of female celebrities had their iClouds hacked and their nudes leaked on 4chan. And this occurred in August of 2014, over 10 years ago now. Celebrities who had to come out and confirmed the authenticity of these leaks, more well known was Jennifer Lawrence, as well as Kate Upton, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, Kaylee Cuoco, and Kristen Dunst. These poor, unfortunate women had their devices hacked through some disgusting celebrity hackers and had their whole entire nudes posted to 4chan. The FBI had to get involved because this is insane. This is an insane data breach, and said, quote, it was aware of the allegations concerning computer intrusions and the unlawful release of material involving high-profile individuals and was addressing the matter. Similarly, Apple stated that they had also been investigating the security breach within their own services, whether it had come from Apple or the iCloud or wherever they'd found this weak spot. And on the 2nd of September 2014, Apple had reported that the leaked images were a result of compromised accounts using, quote, a very targeted attack on usernames, passwords, and security questions. But 5 people in total were actually convicted of these hacking offences and all received prison sentences. I mean, at least someone did get caught for this horrendous breach of privacy. But yeah, this was just something that happened, which is absolutely terrifying. People also like to talk about harassments and raids on 4chan, which aren't what they sound like, so let me explain that a little bit more. Raids are referring to the coordinated or semi-coordinated efforts by 4chan users, usually from the B board or the politically incorrect board, because where else would it be from? And they will target an individual, a group, or a website and then disrupt it with offensive or threatening behaviour. So, for example, these raids can target anything from social media accounts to groups or a website in general. And essentially, a load of 4chan users will go to this target and just spam it with a load of bullshit. Offensive memes, gore, anything. But they would even go as far as to dig up personal information about these creators and then end up doxing them. The term raid in 4chan culture comes from the idea of a digital ambush. So, for example, in 2014, 4chan decided to raid Tumblr, and 4chan users would target Tumblr blogs that they considered social justice warriors and spam their bot blogs with horrendous, violent and racist imagery. And they even coordinated attack times to make sure that they had the most disruption possible. Now, Tumblr users did also attempt to fight back and do the same to 4chan, however they weren't as successful as the 4chan users were, unfortunately, but it did lead to a pretty chaotic back and forth for a good couple of months. Another example was the End Father's Day hoax, where 4chan users would pose as feminists on Twitter and just make shit up that they wanted to end Father's Day, but they weren't. It was all lies from people on 4chan. These people really woke up one day and were like, how can we cause the most shithousery possible? And that was what they came up with. Now, quite possibly the funniest or perhaps not funniest example of this happening, depending on if you're a Taylor Swift fan or not. In 2012, Taylor Swift partnered with Save the Music Foundation, and basically she hosted a promotional contest, and this contest was called Taylor Swift on Campus, and essentially people could go and vote for Taylor Swift to play at their school. Taylor Swift would come to your school and perform a concert. Amazing. Sounds great, right? So when 4chan users found out about this sweet little contest that Taylor Swift was hosting for some really lucky fans, they came together and discussed how funny it would be to manipulate the results. And they decided to vote for Horace Mann, which is a school for the deaf. They voted a school for the deaf, which won, by the way, to receive a Taylor Swift concert. Now, of course, when organisers became aware of the situation, they had to then disqualify the school because the results, were from a raid and not for genuine participation, which, it's not funny, but it's a little bit funny. But Taylor Swift herself had, saw this happen and done it in 10k to the school, so I mean, that was sweet of her. Oh, also the Bieber fiasco also started on 4chan, because do you remember when Justin Bieber was caught by TMZ smoking weed? 4chan users launched a fake awareness campaign that claimed that true fans of Justin Bieber were to protest the drug use, which they weren't. This was all from 4chan. They created fake Twitter accounts posing as devastated fans and posting stock images of injuries with the hashtag for Bieber, which led to some real life fans being tricked into participating and sharing their own injury photos, which were then mocked by 4chan. Yeah, real nice, guys, real nice. 4chan is also pretty big for false accusations and misinformation, because why wouldn't it? Especially on the random boards and the poll boards, where users quickly spread unverified claims, often targeting individuals during high-profile news events. Again, this is where the trigger warning comes into play. For example, in the wake of the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting, where preschool and really young children were targeted in a shooting, some conspiracy theorists quickly took to the poll board and spread the claim that grieving parents were actually actors, hired by the government to fake the massacre as part of gun control agenda. And as you know, Alex Jones is one for heavily pushing this conspiracy theory, which got him in serious hot water. It came from 4chan. Names, photos and personal details of victims' families would then be posted onto 4chan and just mocked. And this led to the families being subjected to years of harassment, death threats and stalking. But as we know, several of these families did sue and were successful in suing the conspiracy promoters. Another example of 4chan just being wrong and incorrect was when the 2017 Las Vegas shooting occurred. Again, the poll board began to absolutely blow up with the shooter's identity, or well, speculated identity, because a random man who had no connection to the event was named as the attacker. And this poor random guy's social media accounts, personal information were plastered all over 4chan, which was shared on Twitter and Facebook before the ID of the shooter was released. This false suspect then had to publicly prove he was innocent, and mainstream media then had to criticise 4chan for being a major vector for this misinformation, and that's just two examples, because as you can imagine there is a whole lot more. Horrifically, 4chan has also hosted some real life murder cases that have unfolded in real time. For example, in August 2015, an anonymous user took to 4chan's B-board and posted that he had killed several women and wanted others to guess who he had killed. And in return, he would lead them to a body that he had dumped back in 1999. So as you can imagine, lots of users thought this was just a joke or a troll, and they jumped on it, but someone actually guessed a name correctly, and the alleged killer posted victims of a young woman on the thread, both when she was alive and then when she was seemingly dead. Several users banded together and found that the woman was named Shauna Maynard, whose killer was never caught. Although the FBI came involved, the user has not posted anything else since, and then has not been identified. The user has not been identified. The Christchurch shooter also infamously took to 8chan, which is like 4chan but worse, and he wrote a 74-page manifesto titled The Great Replacement, and this manifesto was posted to 8chan and was emailed to more than 30 recipients as well as media outlets, and then was shared on Twitter and 8chan. He also made his farewell post on 4chan as well, which if I can find, I'll insert a screen grab of it here. In November of 2014, another real-life murder had occurred over 4chan. A body was discovered in Port Orchard, Washington, after images were posted onto 4chan, and these images of a woman's murdered body were also accompanied by the text, quote, "It turns out it's way harder to strangle someone to death than it looks in the movies." The post later said, quote, "Check the news from Port Orchard, Washington in a few hours. Her son will be home from school soon. He will find her. Call the cops. I just wanted to share the pics before they find me." Investigations later showed that the victim was Amber Lynn Copeland, who was 30 years old, and she had been killed by her partner, which was 33-year-old David Michael Kallick. He actually later surrendered himself the same day, and he was charged with second-degree murder and domestic violence. He was later convicted in April of 2017 and was sentenced to 82 years in prison. Yeah, again, just a handful, but while I was researching this, I also thought this was really interesting, so I was going to mention it. But a report of Jeffrey Epstein's death was posted on the politics board 40 minutes before it was even made public to the media. How that's even possible, I don't know, but it was originally, suspected that the unidentified person who made the post could have been a first responder, but it was later proven that it was not, which then prompted a review by the New York City Fire Department into how this ended up leaking before it was even announced, and they still don't know. But this is really similar to when Chris Benoit, when he killed his family, it was written on Wikipedia that his wife was already dead before it had even been released, and that he'd killed her. It wasn't even announced that it was a murder yet, and it was on Wikipedia that Nancy had died, Chris Benoit had killed her, before it was even public knowledge. The fact that this has happened more than once on the internet is terrifying. But to keep this video relatively short, that is all the information I have. And in conclusion, 4chan is probably one of the most horrible websites to ever be published, and it's still up and running to this day. Despite it being a host and, creator of all of the many greatest internet memes and culture, I think it's safe to say that this website has pretty much run its course. Maybe it's time to retire it. Who knows? But thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed, please let me know. If you have any video ideas, please send them to me over on Instagram, as I will be more likely to see them over there, as the YouTube comments at the minute, there's a lot of them. I'm trying to get through them all. So if you want your requests to be seen, I'd send it over Instagram. If I don't cover it, don't be offended. It probably just means there's not a lot of information on the topic. But yeah, if you'd like to follow me on any of the social medias, please do. It's in my link tree down below, where you can get insights into uploads and, see what I do, see my life, what's not to love about that? I also just want to give a really big thank you to all of the support that I've been getting lately, as I am currently only a few thousand subscribers away from 50,000, which is genuinely, I'm getting emotional, which is genuinely the most insane accomplishment I could have ever achieved in my life. So thank you so much if you're one of them, and even if you're not one of them, thank you for giving me your time of day to yap about some random shit. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. If you would consider subscribing, that would be great, but if not, that's also absolutely fine, and regardless, I hope to see you in the next one. Stay safe.